Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick GA podcast. This is the hurling review of the week. I'm joined this week with Kieran Collins. Kieran, how are things?
Not too bad, Mark. Yourself?
Yeah, good. I suppose there's two proud Limerick and a hand men. I suppose should be some way a little bit positive in terms of the draw in Camogie Park last Sunday. What were your thoughts anyway, Kieran?
Just glad it wasn't another loss to add to the previous one before it. I suppose like any time Limerick go to Camogie Park, it was a real dogfight and war of attrition. I think it'll really set it up well for when they're going to meet later in the championship, and there'll be plenty of fireworks at the end. From a Limerick point of view, I thought it's frustrating to watch compared to last year. There doesn't seem to be much fluency. Teams seem to have a hold on their puck outs. They're just letting them have it, letting the full back line have it, giving them plenty of space. They're not able to run it through the lines as well as they were last year. So I think that's frustrating them. Full back line are having to put in a 50-50 ball in, where before it was, ball to hand. But just, in play and rucks, like picking up, it's just sloppy. There doesn't seem to be any fluency to the play, and in the four games, just no goal threat at all. So it's not what we're used to seeing for the last few years, and possibly at this stage a little bit worrying.
Yeah, I suppose Limerick did start with 11 of the 15 that started the All Ireland Hurling final against Cork, and I suppose for people that expecting that things would click straight away, as you say, Kieran, there was clear cohesion issues. I suppose the inside full forward line would be much maligned, but I suppose quality of ball going into him as well is not the greatest either. I mean, I'm just even thinking about the flashpoint with Gillan, like literally a ball over his head. It's, kind of a 50-50 ball, as you've said, Kieran, there. But I think the distribution, even I think movement of the forward line unit as a whole, it's a bit one-dimensional at the moment, and Clare were probably easy to defend that sort of threat throughout.
Absolutely, yeah. We're so used to the diagonal ball into space, and that just wasn't happening. Clare just closed out the air completely. It was hard to even pick out a man of the match for Limerick. I suppose if I was to pick, I think Burns had a good game. He had 5 points, 3 from frees. Missed 3 or 4 at the end as well, where it could have been more. But I think we're just not seeing the same intent. We're not seeing the same intensity from Limerick, and you can make excuses for that at the start of a league campaign, but coming to the end, you're gonna want to see improvements, and the improvements have been small. I think it's hard to see how in a month or 5 weeks the things are going to change. That's to the intensity they're going to have to bring to it when it comes to championship. Like you're looking at Cork away and Waterford at home, first 2 games. Like it doesn't get any harder. The two teams who are second and third rated to Limerick, I think, so if they're going to be ready, they have to be ready.
Yeah, has been pretty competitive 1A schedule so far for Limerick. When you said likes of Cork there, I think Wexford as well probably come into the equation a bit as well, Kieran, that these teams seem to be on top of the ground at the moment. But it has been a bit of a reality check, I would say, for Limerick. Probably John Kiley, Paul Kinnerk in terms of even the squad depth, giving the amount of French players the opportunity to really impress, particularly with Peter Casey probably unavailable for the early rounds of the championship, to restake a claim for the start of 15. And I suppose apart from Cathal O'Neill, has anyone really kind of stood out there to kind of claim a kind of a starting berth?
No. Aside from O'Neill, and that's only the latter games where he's kind of put his hand up a bit. I thought he was very poor against Wexford. I think he's a player who needs space. Down on Wexford Park, he just didn't get it his way. But I think he's been very exceptional, actually, for the last at least 2 or 3 games he's played. The worrying thing for me with Limerick is like Graham O'Cahey, he won't have the legs for 4 games in 6 weeks. So I mentioned it before, who's going to fill this corner forward spot? David Reedy has been tried there, hasn't performed. Pat Ryan, he's on the panel a good few years. I don't think I've ever seen him start in a championship game. It's always come on as a sub. So you people who think that Limerick had serious strength and depth, really, is there? That's the question. Is there a strength and depth? Now, we had to see our starting 15 on the field at once, but the worrying thing for me is if you look back on our scores to date, we've had 18 points, 113, 118, and 11 points. Like last year, we were looking at Limerick scoring that in a half. So I think that's the biggest difference from Limerick this year is just the intensity going forward and just the actual of getting of scores. Like you can't compare. It's like two different teams.
Yeah, it's that sharpness, that kind of first touch, basic skill set, really. Even I think Kylie alluded to it, Kieran, post game, hand passes, the infamous hand pass rule, but hand passes not going to hand, very kind of the run game you mentioned here at the start of the podcast, such a weapon for Limerick, particularly in the championship last year. We haven't really seen it in any great abundance, unless they're holding things back, which I think is pretty dangerous. I think you'd be kind of trying to set the tone early if that was the case. I think it's just very, very much cohesion issues throughout the pitch. And as you say, Kieran, we're kind of 4 weeks down. We're counting down to that Cork game on Easter Sunday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And, you're entering into the last league game against Offaly in TUS Gaelic grounds, really looking for a performance pretty much to get some confidence going. And I suppose to maybe reassure the fan base in Limerick that the team are going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'd say at the start of the year, if you went into Paddy Power, they wouldn't even give you a price. I think no one would have predicted the way this has gone for Limerick. Maybe it's the master plan for Kylie. I can't see it. I don't think there could be any confidence in any management that the team can turn it on and off as they wish. But not taking away from Clare. I think Clare were good in the day. Like Tony Kelly, he's only back from injury. 11 points. What you'd expect from Tony Kelly. He actually missed a few handy ones, probably later on in the second half that you'd expect him to put over. I'm really impressed with young Meehan. I thought he got the point he got was an exceptional catch between two defenders and slotted it over. Really good player for the future. Dave Fitzgerald, which we mentioned as being inconsistent, he thought he had a great game. I think regarding going back even a month ago, like there was a certain doom and gloom about them. Even Ruairi had alluded to the fact that there were short defenders and so many injuries, and like Kelly is back, and Dangan has come on the last two games, and Shane O'Donnell come back in, and Conlon slotted back to centre back. I don't think it's as bad as what they might have thought at the start of the league. And I think they would have gained a bit of confidence from the Limerick game, and if they can get a result off the Galway game last game, I think they'll go into Munster half confident themselves. Yeah,
definitely, because Clare grew into the game, and it was a strong start, I thought, from Limerick, but particularly in that third quarter, Kieran, Clare really dominated that middle third. Opened up and lead there. But I suppose going back to the opening half, the disallowed goal for Clare. What was your thoughts on that in the 21st minute? Meehan pretty instrumental, as you said there. Good performance. What was your view on it? Did you think that was a corrected call by the officials, or it looked kind of a 50-50 call from where I was standing?
Yeah, I thought I would have given it as a goal. I think it brings up the argument again for a need for like a TMO, for a decision like that. One quick look, all it takes is one look. So I think people are against it for the reason of the time it'll take, and I think what you're looking at 10-15 seconds and you've a clear decision. I think refereeing in the game, it's a big issue for me. Like there was, especially now when they're honing in on the hand pass rule. It was highlighted in the Sunday game that referees penalising the player for a legal hand pass, but they're standing behind the player, so they're having a clear view. So I think referees, they need some aid now. I know it's a fast game, it's a quick game. I think something has to be done to aid them, and there seems to be a lot of these 50-50 calls that can determine what way a game goes. There seems to be a lot more of them in the last few years. The game's getting quicker, players are fitter and faster, and I think it's time for GA to kind of look, maybe even explore the option of like a TMO situation where they can just have a quick look and make a decision based on that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you, Kieran, because I think the case study probably is the Super League. It's on Sky Sports every week, and it's a fast-paced sport. But every try you see the TMO, and it's very interactive. It's within the 10-15 seconds. It's very direct in terms of what the referee's asking the TMO and the video officials, and you get a decision within 15-20 seconds. It's pretty conclusive. it's that 50-50 like an All-Ireland semi-final or All-Ireland final where something's on the line massively. It's probably something that should be considered, but whether the GA powers that be will kind of do that is the other thing. And I suppose the hand pass rule, I know Conor O'Donovan, former Tipperary full-back, suggested scrapping the whole hand pass instead of using your hurl to literally pass the ball, like literally throw a sliotar on your hurl to literally pass the ball to maybe eliminate. But I suppose the hand pass is a fundamental skill of the game. So I'm not sure if there can be some sort of officiating, managerial review of the hand pass, because it's going to blight the championship, Kieran. I can see 40, 50 frees being given every championship game, particularly when it gets to the lower tier competitions, when referees are being massively assessed, looking to get up to the next level, that they're going to be told this is what a hand pass is and what it isn't. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. It should be discussed, because, it could really spoil a potentially great championship this summer.
Yeah, on the other hand, I suppose we'd have to wait and see what way it pans out. Like last year we saw, and a lot of people talk that referees hone in on a certain area in a league campaign and then they back ease off a little bit come championship. I do agree. I think the hand pass is one of the skills of the game. Should not be taken away. Yeah. Referees mightn't be as harsh come championship, but I think, as Shane Dowling made a great point, I think if it has to be seen to blow it, referee like Pod Dwyer, they showed an example where I think it was Horgan. He deemed him to have an illegal hand pass, but Horgan's back with the referee, so I don't know how we could have seen it. Now, I'm not stamping down on referees. I think it's an awful position for them to be in. The game is so quick; they have to make a quick decision. As I said, assistance is needed, but I think it's something that the GA definitely need to look into. And if it's the case, maybe that the linesman can become more interactive with the referee to help out. It's that's probably a debate for another day, but I'm not taking away from referees at all. It's like, I think it's an arduous task every day to take to the field anyway. So
yeah, completely agree with you, Kieran, because even a pull in the air, if you look at the archive videos from the game was being televised, it was a fundamental skill of the game. Now that is completely outlawed. You're getting into massive disciplinary trouble over that. So then to kind of be targeting the hand pass as well, I think it's a step too far there for sure. But I think with the referees, they've an arduous job. The pace and the fitness and conditioning of these intercounty players is scary at the moment. It's kind of lending itself to maybe two referees, one on either side of midfield, to really officiate things, particularly when you get into the business end of the season. But more to follow there, I would think, Kieran, anyway. Yeah. But anything else really stand out for you last weekend in the Allianz Hurling League? Any real performances you kind of took note of?
I suppose I watched the Waterford Tipperary game the other night, and I was blown away about how easily Waterford pulled away in the end from Tipperary, and I suppose if you sit back and look at it, like missing Ozzy Gleeson, Jamie Barron, Hutchison, Lyons, like key players you're going to see in the starting 15 not there, and to do what they did to Tipperary, I think if you're a Tipperary fan coming away last weekend, you're worrying for the first game of championship. Stephen Bennett is in unbelievable form. 116, like he was putting over frees from everywhere. If he carries that form through the year, it'll be hard to see him being stopped. But it's a panel they're creating, like Jack Prendergast, unbelievable game. He looked very sharp, 3 points. Patrick Hearn the same 3 points. You throw Desi Hutchin into that mix, and Ty de Burka, showing glimpses of what he can be. I think come championship he'll be fully fit. They have a solid full back line, Prunty, Irla Daly. I said it before, everything this year has been positive for Waterford. There's been no negativity surrounding this squad. And I think they're really going to fancy themselves coming into championship.
Yeah, it's positively all the way. I think we've said at the start of this hurling podcast series, put up or shut up for Waterford, really, isn't it? Liam Cahill is there how many years now? And they've been steadily evolving and improving as the seasons have worn on. But that Ballygunner win has seemed to have given them an extra edge extra hunger there, particularly within that Waterford camp. And what impressed me most, Kieran, about last weekend with Waterford was I thought the mid-game adjustments, particularly in that opening half. Tipperary had started the game relatively well. Marquee had scored 3 points on the bounce. They were up by 6 points after 20 minutes, but it was that period between the 20th minute to half time. Waterford, whatever adjustments they made, and the players as well, they were able to nullify Tip Middle's third, and literally from then on, Tipperary had no answers. I thought it was just very impressive in-game management by the Waterford panel, and I mean, an awful lot of French players here, really impressing Liam Cowell particularly.
Yeah, it was like the steamroll them. They had no answer for it all. I think my kind of moment of the match was when the goal went in, is when I saw the tide turn. Tip did start very well, but from then on, I think it was just all Waterford. And I think you're getting your answer as to why Cahill turned on the Tip job to stay in Waterford, because they have an array of talent with experience, and yeah, they're going to be a force this year, a real force.
Exactly, and I suppose to compound things for Tipperary, I nailed 2 stats here. One, Tipperary's goal threat, no goal in 3 out of the 4 league games so far, which is not very Tipperary-like. And then the second, news of Seamus Canlon breaking a bone in his hand and looking very, very doubtful for the early rounds of the Munster Senior Hurling Championship. And I know Ruairi had alluded to this last week in terms of that clash between Tipperary and Clare. I mean, that's a massive, massive game for both teams. And to have maybe a talisman of Callan's stature and calibre not there, things that seem to be mounting up a little bit for Bonner and the Tipperary management here.
Yeah, and I think aside from Canada missing, there seems like there's a consistency issue as well with Tipperary forwards. I've been very impressed with Jake Morris this year, but I saw frustration in him the other day. Like, he was trying, I thought he was over trying to get in on goal, at times. But he, apart from forward, I think he's the only man so far this year that's been taking the fight from. Like Mark Yo, 4 points. Breen had 4 points as well. Breen had an exceptional game, but Mark Yo, can he consistently do it? I said, we all know how hard the round robin is. You're talking 4 games, 6 weeks. I think we all know that you need a panel to play the round robin, and if Tip have that panel built up, I think, as Rory alluded to earlier in the podcast, was that Conor Bonner is going to be learning about his team as he goes along. So he doesn't have his set 15, I would imagine, yet. But then I also wonder why we haven't seen Bonnermar yet.
Yeah.
The word was he was back and he had played a Fitzgibbon game, but we haven't seen him in the Tip setup yet. Any word on that, Mark?
Not much. I'm very surprised. I thought last weekend, out of all weekends, should have been the time to have him come in. Bonner has repeatedly mentioned on Tip local radio that he's giving the young guys the chance, any of the French guys an opportunity, which is fair enough. But I thought Bonner, considering his injuries last year, bring him back into the setup, I think he is still a very pivotal guy for Tipperary, but it's a strange call. Whether there was a setback in training, I'm not totally sure, but it is an interesting call. I mean, they have Antrim coming up in Semple Stadium. No disrespect to Antrim, but they're hardly going to really, produce anything there of note there. I mean, Waterford should have been kind of an asset unless Bonner is holding Bonnermar back from that game, but it's unlikely, really. I mean, going back to Tipperary, I mean, you've Craig Morgan, I would say, cornerback, but I think there is massive issues there in that Tip defensive, particularly for me, goalkeeper, and also the full back, particularly with Paulie Marr no longer there, suddenly retiring. You've mentioned it, Kieran, in this podcast, that insurance policy is gone. Quigley, I think, had a pretty arduous outing last weekend, and again, it's only going to increase for the likes of Quigley or whoever's going to go on full back, because the likelihood it could be that Ronan Marr or Barry Heffernan goes back there, but you need him a little bit further out the pitch. So I think from that perspective, Tipperary, as you say yourself, Kieran, are struggling really to find a real solid 15, let alone a panel to come on to make an impact in a championship game in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think Barrett has impressed so far, as has Craig Morgan, but I kind of know it's like a pace issue. I look back at Ronan Hayes' goal. He made it all look very easy. Ronan is going to be, I think you have to play him centre back. think Ronan Maher has to play centre back. You know, it's not just defensively; it's what he offers you going forward as well. Paddy Maher, whenever he left, was always going to be big shoes to fill in that team. I think Tip had banked on him being there for a couple of years, and I suppose his untimely retirement has taken that away. But whatever about a starting 15, I think it's the fringe players that Tipperary don't have.
Yeah. Like I'll throw other two, but these are forwards. I mean, one, Conor Bowe, seems to be, had a very impressive Fitzgibbon Cup campaign. Billy Seymour as well here in GMIT really did kind of lead the line very well. But I mean, Seymour's, I think, just in a training squad at the moment, not really being picked for any consideration. So it's interesting times, I think, for Tipperary, heading into the championship, pretty uncertain. And it's not every year you would really kind of downgrade Tipperary's chances of doing it in Munster. But I think this year particularly, the body of evidence is really suggesting a very tough, difficult debut season for Bonner. I suppose the one standout for me, and this is going to the Kilkenny-Dublin game, and first off, I suppose we'd like to express our condolences to the Shefflin family, the untimely passing of Paul last week. An absolute gentleman, but ferocious competitor on the pitch. Our thoughts are with the Shefflin family, Ballyhale Shamrocks, and Kilkenny Hurling at this time. But I suppose Kilkenny really did issue a real stirring performance, Kieran, in Parnell Park on Saturday, that Paul Shefflin would be very proud of.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like, only the last week or two we've been writing them off, and even in thinking about the championship ahead, I was thinking, are Kilkenny in trouble? Are they going to be the team that doesn't make the top, the three out of Leinster? But like, Cody just gets the best out of whatever 15 or 23 lads he has. He will get the very best out of them. I really impressed by him. Blanchfield, unbelievable game. Sutcliffe had some battle, and that'll be one to watch as well going forward. Wally Walsh scores 1-3. What will he do the next day? That's the issue with Wally Walsh. It's consistency. Padraig Walsh again, the men's 4 points in play. And I think if you look at the spine of the team, you have Hugh Lawler, Paddy Deegan. They look settled there. Padraig Walsh and TJ, when he comes back, I think TJ will slot in full forward. That's your spine of the team, a settled spine of the team. When you have that right, you're halfway there. The only thing I would actually noticed was Kilkenny only made 2 substitutes, and one of them was forced when Tom Phelan picked up an injury and had to go off. So was that
Indeed.
They won comfortably. You'd imagine the bench would have been emptied, so I just wonder why. So only one substitute really, because Phelan was a 4 substitute. So Cody actually made 1 substitute. Is it the case that the depth isn't there? Or I just found it strange compared to Dublin, who used 5 substitutes, But aside from that, like 2-19 from play, only 4 points from place balls. Massey Keown 1-1. I think real positive performance. To just shell shock Dublin, physicality. I think Dublin have had their own way. Look at the teams they've played before. Like 1B is the easier side of the draw. Bar the Antrim game probably was probably a hard test up in Belfast, but Tipperary didn't give them much. Laois the same. So this was the first game where they really had it in front of them, and I was impressed with Dublin up to this point this year, and I hope it's not to slide. But the only negative I would see, Shane or Dowling mentioned as well, was that of the starting 15, 12 have played 4 games in the league.
Yes, yeah.
And that would have been 13, only one O'Donnell picked up a knock before the match. So you're talking 12, 13 players haven't played all 4 games. Is it that there's no depth there, as Shane alluded to, or is this Matty Kenny's 15 and he wants to battle harden them? That's the worrying fact going into where you're playing 4 games, 6 weeks. You need to have freshness coming in off the bench, and that's the one thing that would worry me with Dublin. I think you look at other teams like in Dublin's position, Wexford are giving guys a go. They're giving young guys a go. Conal Flood, Oisin Pepper, Oisin Foley. These guys, young lads coming in. He's battled hard in them to the league, and if he has to throw them in, he can.
Exactly. I think, Kieran, you raised an awful lot of points. That was very surprising, I thought, with Kilkenny. Given the advantage, particularly in the last 10 minutes, wouldn't they throw on a few subs just to give a bit of game time. And I think we've been critical of Kilkenny maybe in the last few years that they've been very overly dependent on the same 18, 19 guys. And I mean, with the Munster schedules, I mean, you're going to have squad depth. Now, the only thing is Ballyhale, Shamrock's guys are coming back in, like Adrian Mullen, Richie Reid. Where does he fit into all this? Because, I mean, he's been appointed, I think, captain for the county. But again, Blanchfield comes in, puts in a solid display. I don't think you're going to tinker with that half back line. So is Richie Reid now going to be more a midfielder? And then you've obviously TJ come in. So there's only three. But, I mean, the panel has to be a bit more dynamic than that, really, doesn't it?
And Owen Cody to slot in there as well. So
yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden, Mossy Keown, Wally Walsh, there is actually. I thought Phelan was playing well actually until he went off. I don't know what the story with his injury was, if he's going to be out for a while. But all of a sudden they have actually got one or two reliable subs or playable subs to come on. Look, I think Kilkenny are not the teams what they were, but Brian Cody is still getting the best out of the players he has at his disposal. He's still getting the best. They have won 2 Leinster titles that they had no right to win, but they're still there, and they're not beat until that whistle is gone.
Kieran, I just thought the work rate from minute one from Kilkenny throughout the team was just ferocious. They hunted in packs, didn't give Dublin any early momentum. It was a key game for Kilkenny. They needed to go up to the capital and really send a message of intent to Dublin that, hey lads, you think you're going to kind of walk all over us. It was, I thought, a psychological hit on the Dublin solar plexus, to be perfectly honest. And I think the tribute here on stats wise is that Dublin full forward line that wreaked havoc against Tipperary the week before. All of the full forward line was hauled off before the 15th minute. They were completely nullified. Didn't get any joy at all off the full back line, who stuck to their task gamely. You had Dangan there clearing an onto ball, Ronan Hayes. They were all taken off pretty soon into the second half. So I think from that perspective, it was kind of one-way traffic in that third quarter, really, wasn't it, Kieran? And just Kilkenny in cruise control thereafter, which kind of bodes well for Cody. But as I said, there are squad depth issues, and I think for Dublin as well, it's a massive, massive setback.
Yeah, and typical Kilkenny, 2 goals in 3 or 4 minutes and sees off the game. I think Kilkenny, we'll see how good they are next day out against Waterford. It's all to play for the two of them teams at the top. If Kilkenny do beat Waterford, Dublin can progress, which we all thought they would have at the start of this league, or first week or two. So it's in Kilkenny's hands. If Waterford win, it'll probably be looking at Waterford Dublin going through to the semis from 1B. But I think that'll be a good game because there's something to play for. A lot of the last games in the league, they're kind of dead rubbers, like Limerick Offaly. You're looking at, there's nothing to be gained. Galway, again, no team can progress. Will teams start slowing down a little bit with the championship in mind? Or Wexford Cork the same, they're both through, so it'll be interesting to see what type of teams. I imagine Cork will go with a weakened team, give some guys a break. They've had a few players, like Kingston has played every game, I think, and maybe bar one. So they've a few guys on the road for the last few weeks, so probably well-earned break home before the semi-final. But I think, Kilkenny will really see what they're made of against Waterford, and probably interesting to see what way they turn out.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose we can turn our focus to Cork Galway. I mean, it was a pretty sombre atmosphere down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, given the news of Paul Shefflin's untimely death. Galway were never really put away by Cork, but you never felt at any stage that Cork were anyway in trouble. I thought the key stat from here was 1-4 came from turnovers for Cork. The goal, Dyberk again, was kind of unfortunately involved for Galway, getting dispossessed, and Patrick Horgan scoring the goal, but didn't hit the heights probably Cork of the previous week against Limerick, but sufficient enough to get the job done, Kieran.
Yeah, it was a funny game. I heard from a few people who were at it, it was just like a somber atmosphere there, and kind of came across on the television. Horgan played well. I don't know his celebration for the goal, who he's trying to silence or what critics he has. Maybe it's the management of Cork, I don't know. But the 2 old guards, Hoggy and Harnedy, 113 and 4 points. Very good games. My issue with Cork, and it's been talked about, is Coleman. Coleman is so good going forward, but they're using Mellerick. Okay, last year it was Mellerick. Kieran Joyce, we've seen him doing it in previous games. Mellick is dropping off his man to come back to cover Coleman to let him sweep. Mellick is marking Ronan Glennon, who scored 5 points. So I think, take a risk. I think Cork need to take a risk in this. Just move Coleman forward. Take, like a lot of people are talking up Kieran Joyce. He's going to be the centre back for the future. Put him in there. Take a risk. Look at all the teams who've won All Irelands over the years, like Clare in 13 with Shane O'Donnell putting them in for the final. How many times did Cody do it? Be it All Ireland finals or replays. They took a risk, and I think Cork need to take a risk. I think it's a dangerous game. You're going to have. You're relying on another man to cover your area. I think it's a dangerous game to play. Like if you're getting 5 points scored off you in a league game, what's going to happen in a championship game when intensity ups another level or a couple of levels. So I think that's as good as it may seem. I think that could be a problem area for Cork.
And I don't think it's going to get realised until they actually get defeated this season. And I think it could be too late, Kieran. Potentially in a first round Munster Senior Hurling Championship. I mean, the fact that they've won their 4th league fixture in a row for the first time in 14 seasons, that's all well and good. But as you say, I think it's still masking a few issues, particularly defensively, particularly with Coleman, as you say, outstanding. But it's not as if any other intercounty team haven't seen that. They're not going to exploit it right now, are they, in the league? To really kind of show their hand. I mean, the championship is where it's at. And you would, sincerely hope, as two Limerick men, that, Kylie and Kinnerk have kind of duly noted that.
Going back on Limerick Cork last year, and any time in the last year or two that Limerick have played Cork, Cian Lynch has destroyed Mark Coleman. So defensively, he has destroyed him. Not taking away from what Coleman does going forward, he is exceptional going forward. But Cork know to win All Ireland at some stage, maybe not now the way things are going, but they were going to have to beat a Limerick team. And to beat a Limerick team, something was going to have to change there. Now, if they think it's bringing back a man from midfield to cover so that Coleman can roam, that's fine going forward. But what happens if Mellick is the man and he's not available? Or, you know what I mean? There's not a fluency between that play. You're leaving huge areas. You're leaving, I think it's a dangerous game. And, yeah, like Ronan Glennon, great game, 5 points. Tom Monaghan, really impressed with Tom Monaghan, 4 points. And shown for everything as well. Conor Cooney, I think he's just shown his inconsistency that I think has always been there. He hit 6 threes, nothing from play. He's hot or cold as one or the other with Cooney, I think. What is the story with Nyland, Mark? I was expecting to have seen Nyland. Is he after carrying a knock from the Fitzgibbon, or is it just...
I think there was kind of precautionary stuff, particularly in Fitzgibbon. Now, he's played a bit of hurling, certainly, with NUIG in the Fitzgibbon Cup, so I think there might be a little bit of precaution there, because he did put in his club mate Gavin Lee in at corner forward, did score the 2 points. He's an outstanding prospect, but I think he probably needs a year or two bedded down in underage intercounty hurling. So I think it's probably precautionary here, Kieran, and I probably alluded to Galway. They've looked at 33 players now in the league campaign. Now, you can say not a vast majority were kind of being blooded in, particularly against Offaly in that opening round, but they have... The Limerick game was be all end all. They have then started to roll the dice a little bit in terms of rotation, like say Glennon coming in, who is an outstanding talent. But again, this Clare game coming up, I think you should be seeing Evan Nyland, because I think he should be a lock, particularly in that full forward line. And I suppose it is a key issue for Galway as well during that match, how they're going to involve Conor Whelan in the full forward line and put some of the wides, the shot selection from about 50, 60 yards was just ridiculous. When you had Conor Whelan in one-on-one with the full back, it was just, that sort of perspective. I think Galway will be happy enough in terms of the effort, the work rate, but I think there's plenty to be pondering in terms of Galway right now. I think they will lock it in terms of Clare. They'll put a full side out, I would say, that game, but I would certainly see Nyland featuring against Clare for sure.
Yeah. No, I said young guys, Monaghan, really impressive. And if that's what the future is for Galway, I think there's nothing to worry about. Regarding Whelan, I think he's the gel of the whole forward unit. I think he's taken the armband from Canning. That I still think going forward, when it comes into a tight game and the game's in the melt pot, that Galway will struggle for a leader. Canning was that man. He got him out of many a hole over the years, and I think they're hard boots to fill.
Oh, sure, he's mercurial. He's the maestro. There's no one to touch him. Cathal Mannion, I think an awful lot of people within Galway are looking to see him push on to the next level. Now, he hasn't really shown a whole pile in terms of National Hurling League. Now, he's getting his 3-4 points from play, but again, he's very open, middle third. He's a roving role, whatever. But again, I thought some of his shot selection at the weekend, again, was very, very erratic. So for Galway to have any chances here, I think Conor Whelan has to be an influential factor, but Cathal Mannion as well. But also, I think 3 and 6 for Galway. I think there's still issues there. Daithí Burke hasn't really recovered back from his knee injury. And I think there is a genuine concern here in terms of centre half back as well. Gerard McInerney's physicality, great player, but I think pace-wise could be got at.
Maybe an issue, yeah.
And
you're looking at Daithí Burke, 2 mistakes, 2 goals in the last few weekends, so now look, we're quick to not trying to slate a man. It's the league, and I'm sure intensity will rise in his game as well. But I suppose looking forward, it would be you'd be picking it out as a weakness maybe if you were to come against Galway.
Yeah, but one thing about Daithí Burke, he always performs at the highest level.
Absolutely.
I think with the knee rehab and stuff, I think he's been rushed back a bit. I would hope anyway for Galway's sake that he'll be secure around the houses in the full back line, because Galway certainly need it. So it'll be interesting. I think the Clare Galway derby match will take a life of its own here up in Salt Hill on Sunday week. And hopefully I think Galway, they just need a win just to steady the ship a little bit. 2 losses on the trot. If it was 3, then I think there's a kind of morale issues gonna seep into the side heading into that Wexford game. So I think that's a key game more for Galway than it is for Clare, I would think.
I think Galway are a confident side, really, aren't they? So I think it'll do no harm to get the win there. But the other thing I'm an interesting one is, will Cooney continue with the freeze, or will they hand him to Nyland if he plays? I think Cooney is a confidence player where if he's hitting his freeze well, it kind of rubs off and he's open play game, or will it just be handed over to Nyland if he starts?
I think the brutal fact of the matter here for Shefflin is one of them starts, the other is on the suspension. You can't have 2 of them on the pitch, really. Nyland's place ball striking is phenomenal. I think it's one of the best kind of free taking techniques in the country right now. But do you Cooney seems to be playing predominantly as a half forward along with Joseph Cooney, looking for a bit of big physicality in there. So I think that'll be an intriguing watch. Now, I've mentioned that Nyland should be getting his game against Clare, but I think the starting line can really kind of be a very interesting watch to see what Shefflin's thinking about going into that Wexford game, because Clare and Wexford, I think, have similar kind of traits in terms of physicality, their attacking play. So I think that'll be an interesting watch, Kieran.
Yeah.
Certainly. I suppose we can get down to where you're based these days, Kieran. Wexford continuing a great role. And Offaly again showing some nice signs. I promised there under Michael Fennelly for good periods.
Yeah, at least look from game 1 to game 4, I suppose they've shown improvement. Which is what Fennelly look for. I thought was the Galway first game, they looked really off the pace, especially defender. If you look at Grove McInerney's goal, it seemed to sail through. But from that to now, I think there's been a huge improvement. They give Wexford a fair game for the best part of 50-55 minutes. Roy O'Connor, absolutely impressive again. I think they just need to wrap this lead up in cotton wool now and hope for no injuries going forward. One player who's really, actually a few have really kind of taken my eye. Conal Flood, wing back, coming on off the bench, scoring 2 points. I think he's got 2 points every game he's played. Oisin Foley, who's a brother of Paddy Foley, centre back, I was really, really impressed today. And as I said earlier, I think Egan is doing what Davy didn't do last year, and he's given the fringe players a good go of it and getting them experience. And I think, if needed, and when it comes to championship, he can call on them, I think, with a bit of confidence.
Now, on Offaly's behalf, I know we've been very critical of them in the opening rounds, but I suppose again this weekend and the fluency of the podcast, we have Ruairi Walsh on here as well. How are you, Ruairi?
Hey, Mark.
Just in terms of Offaly, I mean, I think some good progression there. I mean, Luke O'Connor came in, scores 2-6, kept in the game again. Kind of bodes well for Joe McDonagh Cup for Offaly, given this latest showing in Chadwick's Wexford Park.
Yeah, Offaly, they seem to be getting stronger. Even, let's say, against Wexford, and it was an away game compared to the one against Clare, they were, they pushed Wexford that bit more than they had previously pushed Clare. You're just worried now that coming up against Limerick in the last round of the games, and the Limerick team that will be mad for a victory, and maybe John Kiley is changing his plans there in terms of with the strength of the team, trying to get a good win under their belts going into championship, that, it could be the wrong game for Offaly to finish on, after showing progress all along, if they do get a beating against Limerick, which is highly possible if John Kiley is thinking that way. So yeah, and another thing is, as we saw with Antrim, Antrim looked to be progressing and flying and get turned over by 14-man Laois. Is this going to happen to Offaly if they end up in a relegation final where they come up against Antrim now, and she'll be on the other foot maybe, where Offaly look like they've been kind of going quite well in the league, only to be, turned over in a game that they must win.
I suppose the quote of the weekend came from Cheddar Plunkett, didn't it? Post-game, after the 1-point win, 14-man Laois beating Antrim. I know I just had to nag him down last week about Antrim, and so it kind of proved, unfortunately. But his quote, "Nobody in the GAA gives a fiddler's about our counties." I mean, it was a pretty emphatic statement, I thought, from Cheddar, in terms of Laois, the Carlows, the Westmeaths, the Antrims, just in terms of trying to survive in top-tier hurling, really. Really doesn't do a whole pile for them, does it, in terms of Antrim or Offaly potentially heading down into 2A next season?
No, yeah, that's it. There is, like, the gap is still huge. Like, you look at Antrim, Offaly, Laois, they're all still, I know Laois turned Dublin over a couple of years ago, and what was, I suppose, the biggest shock in the championship in, let's be honest, 10, 15 years, and that, looking at the levels they're both operating at, that gap is still there. And it's grand saying every year, it's great for these teams to be up in 1A, 1B. But, like, is the gap really closing with these teams? Like, they kind of yo-yo up and down, and you're just hoping that one of them comes out of the pack. That an Offaly or a Laois or an Antrim actually, take their place at the top table and are competitive in a provincial championship when they get there.
Indeed. Kieran, any thoughts?
I mean, even looking at the Laois Antrim game, okay, we mostly tipped Antrim to win. I think that was more from a want for them to win more than you think they were going to win. But I was really impressed with Laois, playing most of the game with 14 men. Chad Dwyer was immense, I thought. He put points over from everywhere, and even the point to win the game, over his shoulder. It was unbelievable. Stephen Maher, I think, got man of match, 8 points, 4 from place balls. Paddy Purcell, great goal, scored 1-1. So, but I think credit to Laois, like Antrim, left behind them. They should have, when they went ahead, they should have steamed on and won by 3 or 4 points, but they didn't. Laois held on. I think credit to Laois. I think it was a harsh strike hard. I think, talking about referees earlier, like I'm an old style traditional hurler. I like, it's part of it. It wasn't high. I think another referee, you might have seen a yellow for the same incident. I think it was a harsh red. No, credit to Laois. They held out well with 14 men, and I think, like, Antrim are really relying on Ian McMahon, so he just didn't fire. He'd won 7, but 7 of them were from place ball, so the goal from play. So he's obviously well held back there.
And if any team are used to playing with 14 men, it's Laois.
Or Limerick.
Fact.
Although, Rory, I must say, things are going to change, and we have a clear man wearing a Limerick jacket.
Okay, I'll just.
There you go. Yeah. I suppose, Rory, you've come in late, and you'll probably hear the podcast later on. But what were your kind of viewpoints of the weekend? I know from a Clare perspective, we've kind of said that it was a very positive performance, I thought, from Clare, given the side that they'd lined out.
It was, and the main thing, the main word I'd use about the performance was there was a composure we hadn't seen yet from the backs, especially. I know Limerick, both teams mirrored each other the way they set up, but I know Limerick kind of dropped off, but like the Clare backs were like comfortable on the ball. It was ball to hand. There wasn't the same mistakes we saw against Wexford where there were fumbling kind of unforced errors. So yeah, the unforced errors were kind of gone, and that was a huge plus, and it gave them a platform. Like the half back line, especially David McInerney, John Conlon, the two of them, like, really, like, I suppose we all know that they have good ball handling skills, and it just, I thought, like, they really showed up the half back line. And I've been saying all along, every week I was saying my worries about the Clare backs, but that half back line looked really strong, and kind of people are saying, okay, Limerick were missing Sean Fane and Kyle Hayes, but the one line that was intact was their all-star half forward line of Morrissey, Lynch and Hegarty. And like, you'd have to say like that there was, apart from like Hegarty got good points and Tom Morrissey kind of, one-off kind of points, like Clare half back line kind of, I thought, handled them really well. And that gave Clare a platform to kind of stay in the game. I thought Cathal Malone as well, pretty effective wing forward. I know he had a few bad wides early in the game, which I'm sure Lohan was probably hammering at him this week because, they're kind of ones you expect to get where he got a clear shot away. But overall, like, the main thing I'd say is there's a lot of hope now going into the championship, which maybe I didn't have a couple of weeks ago. But
he's changed his tune here.
And
Conor Cleary is literally a sticky fullback.
Yeah, he suits a certain type of player, and it was the same against Wexford. He suited Conor McDonald. Conor Cleary loves marking, because the aerial ball, like if you have Aaron Gillane in there, you're going to hit a certain amount of aerial ball in there. Same with Conor McDonald, and like Cleary's strength is in the air, and he does, like, I suppose Ruairi Hayes next to him kind of does cover a lot on for his speed in the ground. But yeah, it's a certain type of full forward that suits him, and yeah, I think Aaron Gillane is that type. Different type of player. I'd be a bit worried. Yeah, it did suit. So yeah, hope going in. And as we mentioned last week, this game for Clare against Tipperary, like Tipper coming off a Waterford match in the first round, Clare have a bye. This championship game in Thurles is make or break for either of them, because Clare win that game and they have 2 home games and then the neutral game in Thurles. So gives them every chance of finishing top 3, but they have to beat Tip in Thurles first match. I don't see Clare qualifying if they don't win that game.
And it can go either way, Rory, too. Like, Tip having the game under their belt facing into Clare could be an advantage for them. Mm-hmm. Or, Clare being fresh, obviously. But looking at the form now, you'd have to say that we were just mentioning it earlier, the difference between the start of the league to the end of the league with Clare's progress, you'd have to tip Clare to be Tip.
Yeah, I suppose, and look, 4 weeks is going to be from the break of league to championship. It is a bit of a gap, and it depends how teams handle it. I would sooner be in Clare's position now, because we said this last week about, does Bonner really know his team at the moment? I think Lohan after Sunday is getting a lot closer. I know we've potentially the Shane O'Donnell's coming back and Ian Galvin's, Dermot Ryan especially. So Lohan is kind of looking now at a settled team and slotting in these guys rather than kind of, rearranging the whole chessboard as Colin Bonner is facing, down in Tipperary. We said this last week. We think Bonner is furthest away from a championship team, and I'd say again after the Waterford game that hasn't changed.
And will Aidan McCarthy make it back?
Well, word is like that he might be back for his club during the summer. It looks like championship is going to be too early for him. Yeah, a serious work injury, and I think it's just the break was in an awkward spot for in terms of speed of healing. So it looked. At the time, that was people were saying that it's an extremely serious injury and he'd be a full year out. But just talking to somebody, they were saying that he might be back for summer. But as we know, the championship is finishing for pretty early this year. But
he could be thundered in there for a club championship, maybe potentially.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but I suppose, guys, can we kind of switch on to, I suppose, third level? Rory Walsh, University of Limerick, the freshers team. Conquered all before them this season. That was quite a comprehensive performance against a gallant DCU side yesterday in Dangan. I suppose, what were your thoughts, Rory, on that 120 to 11 point win?
Yeah, like they met in the league semi-final and it was played on the 4G pitch in Maguire's in UL, and it was similar to the UCD game. It was a bit of a massacre. So like DCU were coming off that knowing they had been beaten heavily by UL in the league. So in a way, I suppose they were hoping the grass pitch was going to be a bit of a leveler. After the rain that fell as well, it was going to, maybe inhibit UL's style a small bit. And so yeah, look, they were a lot more competitive this time around, but like this is kind of a once in a lifetime fresher team, as we mentioned. And even the injuries they have, Mark Fitzgerald, Waterford senior, still injured, Liam Lynch, Ronan Lyons from Monaleen hamstring injury as well. Like they've serious injuries, and they're still able to put out an extremely strong team. So yeah, Joe McGrath, in fairness to Joe McGrath's manager, he's a Toomey Vara man, Conor McGrath's father. living in Cratloe. And Joe McGrath, I've seen him with this bunch, up close, and like he does inherit, a lot of guys that are stars coming in there with reputations. In this case, he had 2 guys with senior medals coming in, and he's just able to ground them. And the whole idea is, I suppose, with college lads is just get them to that team spirit and get them playing for each other and working for each other. And Joe did that extremely well. I know you might say, oh, look at the players he's to pick, but you still have to gel them as a team, and that can be quite difficult. Like I even know with given hand with the Fresher 2 team that like this year as well, because of the strength of the Fresher 1s, we're blessed with an amount of county under 20s, but just trying to get them all to play together is difficult. And you can get caught, you can get caught on that day where every lad goes out and says, I'm going to be the hero today and score 5 points from play. And like that is a dangerous way for a team, and it can happen with these college teams. So yeah, I think a lot of credit in a way goes to management for getting the team to play as a team. And I think that was very evident last night as well, that the team were playing for each other. I know Aidan O'Connor stood out, and surely John Kiley is paying attention here to Aidan O'Connor, because in a place where Limerick are kind of struggling at the moment, full forward line, although to be honest, I didn't think the delivery they got in the last day was exceptional, but like Aidan O'Connor has been the standout player in the last 2 rounds for UL in the semi-final and final, and it's surely worth a look.
I would think so, because I know clubman Kieran Barry's being called into the Limerick county squad. I mean, wouldn't be a realms of possibility that Aidan O'Connor is getting a call up here for a training session or 2 to impress. I think definitely with the squad depth, particularly in that instant forward line. I think we'd mentioned it, Kieran, earlier on in the podcast, just in terms of Graham Mulcahy and his durability in terms of the championship. Maybe something new, something fresh to kind of really spark that full forward line. Seems a no-brainer just to kind of bring him in to the setup and see what he's about. Yeah, and I suppose we can finish off, guys, with the schools. Scoil Reach and St. Kieran's, and into the final. St. Kieran's kind of ending the dreams of Tulla in Nina 316 to 11 points. But I think speaking to a few Kilkenny folks after the game, I think this has been regarded as the best performance that St. Kieran's had put on the season, and really led by the impressive half-back line of Lennon, Cody and Fitzpatrick particularly. I don't know, guys, if you saw any of the games or any initial thoughts in terms of the final.
Yeah, I was at the Tulla St. Kieran's game, and yeah, centre back Fitzpatrick is like he's a giant. Like he's 6'3" or 4", and he's built like a 24-25-year-old. So sometimes you look at these guys and you say, well, can they hurl? But he can hurl. Very good in the air, controlled centre back really well. A lovely centre forward as well. His name, black helmet, real Kilkenny style. Touch and hands, and gave a brilliant pass for their second goal. And to be honest, in the game, Tulla did not hit the heights they did in the Harty Cup final, and even O'Connor midfield was limping very early in the game to put him into full forward. Oisin Clune, wing back, seemed to have came out into the pitch with kind of a hamstring strapping, and wasn't moving. Like this guy was flying up and down the wing against Scoil Reach. So but they were still in the game into the second half. They had the breeze with them, and they got it down to 4 points. And at the moment they got hit with that goal I mentioned earlier, super goal for Kieran's. And from that moment on, like, it was Kieran's just took over the game, as the Kilkenny team can do, and just kind of, by the end of the game, it's hard to believe actually that Kieran's and Scoil were both beaten teams, and they're both in the final. Kieran's were beaten in the semi-final in Leinster.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kieran's, just coming in on the rail, like, they're really producing their best hurling at the right time, and there's that hoodoo from Scoil Reach as well, isn't there, leading into this final as well.
Joe, it's super as well. This is taken over now from the club final. It's going to be on St. Patrick's Day in Croke Park. So, so Thursday Croke Park, it's a great showcase for it, especially now that gap, and I'm delighted like that the GA have filled that gap before, maybe one of the other sports in Ireland kind of said, oh, St. Patrick's Day, let's take over that. But Croke Park, and a great day for the players as well to get out there. It's something I suppose lads would be dreaming of. And still, and we've a bit of a Clare contingent in with Scoil as well. Davy Kennedy scored 1-2 there, corner forward, a Bridgeman. Real fast, real your traditional nippy corner forward. And I'm sure Croke Park's going to suit him if they can, get him into open space. Yeah, and the last day as well, Shane O'Brien, Niall Farrell took a knock from Broadford, and Shane O'Brien took over the freeze. Did really well, Shane O'Brien from Kilmallock. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Kieran's really impressed me the other day. It's going to be hard for Scoil to beat them. Especially, and Kilkenny teams has been Croke Park. Somebody saying to me tonight a stat that Scoil have played Kieran's 5 times and still have yet to beat them. So I'm sure that's
exactly.
They're playing the minds.
Yeah. Because I recall the 4 finals, even when Declan Hannon was part of the Scoil Reach team, and they got so near but yet so far from that dominant side. And I mean, they're going to be looking at Keane Scully as well, Scoil Reach, to reproduce, deliver a performance. Now, he was superb sweeping there, and he did score a few points as well. I mean, I suppose Good Counsel probably desperately disappointed in terms of the performance opening half. I was at the game, and to be perfectly fair, they squandered an awful lot of good chances in the opening half. They really could have built up a nice little lead there, and the fact that Good Counsel didn't have a point from playing the second half, lads, is just tail of the tape, really. Jack Redmond was really dependent on the frees, and as you say, Shane O'Brien with the 1-8, David Kennedy then with a crucial goal, kind of just really to open that game out a little bit. Scoil Reach did see it very well, and I suppose wish Niall Moran the best, I suppose, being from a hand anyway, Kieran. Hopefully they'll do the job, and what a spectacle in Croke Park.
I think as well, regardless of the results, I think the year will be remembered for Tulla's, fairy tale run to the Harty Cup, so no, that'll be remembered in folklore, I think.
It's no disgrace for Tulla to be beaten by St.Kieran. Like, they're absolutely quality outfit, and the fact that it was a fairy tale, it gives inspiration for every provincial hurling secondary school program. That you don't have to be the big massive college to really compete at the highest level. East Clare hurlers, they had the bond, the spirit, the drive, and the hurling skill, and a quite inspirational story. And well done to Tulla this year. And I suppose just to finish off, lads, it'd be remiss of me not to say about the Camogie All Ireland finals. St.Rynagh has continued a massive year for them in terms of winning the intermediate against Salty Lancacara. And then Sarsfields. I mean, guys, the context of this, I mean, for a parish, 3 hinterlands, Bullawn, New Inn, Woodlawn, 2 primary schools, and to go into Croke Park and to win 2 All-Irelands here in the last 3 championship seasons, nothing short of sensational. Michael Hopper McGrath managing, his daughter Siobhan McGrath, superb 1-7, but I thought it was a very entertaining game, and massive congratulations to Sarsfields. I suppose with that, guys, it's been a lengthy one, but I think we've plenty to get through. I'd like to thank Kieran and also Ruairi here as well for coming in. I know you've been late there in training. I suppose the video analysis was being done there, Ruairi, for the first half an hour of the podcast, but much appreciated. And I suppose next week we can run the rule over the final round of the Allianz 1A and 1B games. Until then, thanks, lads.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.